Okay. My presentation is about Pando. It's the oldest, heaviest, and largest, with an asterisk, living organism that we know of for certain. There are other large living organisms that are really, really old, but they haven't been verified. And they haven't been verified as being a clonal colony. And Pando happens to be a boy. And I apologize because that wasn't really Pando. That was actually a picture of a beech tree that's about 75 years old, taken by a hiker in the Belgian forests, or Bulgarian, I'm sorry, the Bulgarian forests. And the problem I found with starting with a whiz-bang picture of Pando is that it just doesn't quite translate. It's a beautiful living organism, but as a photograph, it's not as photogenic as its beauty should make it. And Pando is huge. There are a lot of different clonal colonies of trees, but Pando, as far as we know, is the largest. And that's just to tease you with it, it's 100 acres of area, a little bit more, like 107 acres of area. And all of that are quaking aspens. And let me tell you something about clonal colonies. It's something we already know a lot about. And a clonal colony is when any plant vegetatively reproduces itself, producing genetically identical individuals. And they can be plants and fungi and bacteria. There's seagrasses that have formed clonal colonies. They can have either gender or be gender neutral, so to speak. But one of the things that all clonal colonies have in common is that they are all literally clones. And one of the clonal colonies we're very familiar with is Bermuda grass. And Bermuda grass, as we know, reproduces from stolons and from rhizomes. There are other types of grass that also produce from stolons and rhizomes, but Bermuda tends to be the one that people are most unhappy with if they don't like it. And if they do like Bermuda, it's constantly a struggle of telling it where to go. Other methods of vegetative reproduction are, of course, making plantlets and adventitious rooting and sprouting. But in fungus, they produce mycelia and rhizomorphs. And the rhizomorphs sort of are like rhizomes in other plants. And they tend to follow along, roots of trees and will pop out here and there. And of course, bacteria, they have cellular division. Bacteria are interesting in that they can also exchange genetic material from bacterium to bacterium, thereby producing a totally new bacterium. And then those bacterium can reproduce by cellular division. Some of the stolons and runners plants, they're above ground, of course, and they're looking for a place to lay down their roots. Of course, Bermuda grass, strawberries, there's vines of many types. Usually you'll see in stolons they will have internodes along length of the vine or the runner, and then a part that's looking to set down roots, as you can see in the strawberry plant on your right-hand side. Rhizomes and mycelia in the case of the fungus. When the roots reach up, the grasses of all types and bamboo have the rhizomes, and that's a sample of an iris chrome and the running bamboo rhizome. In clumping types of grasses and bamboo, of course bamboo really is a grass, the rhizomes are these really, really short things kind of looking like grubs, and that's why they grow more in a clumping fashion as opposed to the runner type like Bermuda grass, because the rhizomes in the running type seek out new ground. And then there's plantlets. I thought these things are so darn cute. I like to think of them as mini-me's. And sometimes stolons and rhizomes create a complete plant. And occasionally in that situation, the plantlet will stay attached to its mother. And occasionally, like in the succulent on the left-hand side of the screen, what happens is once the plantlet has grown to a sufficient size, it just falls right off and starts growing on its own. Either way, it's creating its own little clonal colony because they are all, of course, genetically identical. The thing that I found the most interesting in the formations of clonal colonies are when the roots become really overpowering. It's called adventitious rooting. It's a sort of aerial rooting, and some plants do it by chance, and some of them do it by design. Plants like poison ivy, I've seen they'll send out their little aerial roots, and if it touches ground, that's fine. It will send down more roots. And if it doesn't touch down to ground, that's fine too. It'll just keep on growing up, and it uses it for support and can be used for propagation and for nutrients. What we have here are a banyan tree, which is a type of fig tree, and of course poison ivy, and another type of banyan tree that is frequently called the strangler tree. Now, strangler trees and banyan trees are considered very special in India, and these are types of figs, and they can start out as an epiphyte, living first as a harmless little sprout like some orchids do and some other little plants do when they grow from a seed that's been dropped from a bird. They just are able to sprout and kind of live off the air for a while. But with the strangler fig, what it does is it sends out little roots, and the roots go down to the ground, and when they touch ground, they tend to thicken. And in the case of the picture in the middle of the screen, they start to strangle the tree. And one of the results can be that the tree totally dies and decays, and you have a really amazing and bewildering column of fig tree. The figs produced by the banyan tree aren't really commercially viable as far as selling or eating. They're mostly eaten by birds. Some people say that they're really nice and tasty, but getting them before the birds do, not always an easy thing. So probably don't see the seeds available or the fruits available. More adventures in rooting, the sacred banyans. This one is of the great banyan tree in India, and this thing just keeps on growing. These are images taken outside of its protected area. A fence has been built up around the center of the tree. And of course, the banyan tree said, no, I'm not going to be fenced in, and it just keeps on growing. It sends its little roots out, and the roots touch ground, thicken, and they make this amazing lattice work. And it is all a clonal colony. The great banyan tree, earlier in the 20th century, suffered a lot of damage, and the tree that is at the heart of the banyan eventually succumbed to the damage that it received and began to rot. The decision was made at that time to remove the heart of the great banyan tree, and that made it more of strictly a clonal colony as opposed to a tree at the center, which had a 50-foot diameter trunk with all its little baby trees around it, to being just a clonal colony. And when I say just, I don't mean to make it seem insignificant, because this is something that is 4 acres in area, and it's still growing. And it's not stopping. Roots or trunks or both. Some quick stats of the great banyan tree of India. As I said, 4 acres, about 4,000 trunks or roots that have been sent down from the branches, thickened, and come to support the trees and provide additional support so that the tree can keep on growing. And it is estimated as being 250 years old or older. They don't really know for sure. Many clonal colonies of banyan tree have been documented in India and the regions around India. Even Alexander the Great documented coming across a great mighty banyan tree. So, very old. The other type of adventitious sprouting is what I call reaching for the sun. And they are the invisible colony trees because, of course, roots, you don't usually see them unless it's like the banyan tree. And they will send up the sprouts, or suckers as they're sometimes called. And they assist the plant to provide nutrients. The parent plant can provide support for the younger tree, and the younger tree can rejuvenate the older tree. Eventually, the root system takes precedence over any one of the trees because the trees can be killed by a fire or even disease. And if the roots haven't been damaged, it can send out new shoots and the tree will continue to survive. There are many common woody plants that send up suckers and shoots. Of course, the quaking aspen, and that's the type of tree that Pando is. And there's the black locust and the honey locust and the Kentucky coffee tree. And those 3 are legume trees, and they seed with these really hard beans. The huckleberry, which is the parent to the blueberry, or the wild parent. There's one old huckleberry bush that was around 1,300 years old, and unfortunately part of it was killed for making a road, but the rest of it is still capable, still living. There is a creosote bush, well, not really a bush, of course, because it's a clonal colony, and that's estimated to be about 1,000 to 2,000 years old, and it sends up new shoots to renew itself and keeps on trucking. The Pando, massive, old, and discreet. Originally was documented in 1968 by Burton v. Barnes. And Burton, he just kept studying that tree. As I said, it's big, covers 100 acres. And for size comparison, if you've ever been to the Mall of America, it is bigger than the entire area of the Mall of America. Oh, what did I just do? I have no idea what I just did. Well, I hit escape and darn it. Let's see.
There you go.
There we go. There. Okay. I was trying to see if there were any questions so far, but the way my computer is doing the presentation, I can't see if there's any comments or anything. I'm kind of flying blind here.
Trish,
Yes.
Someone had asked a while ago when you had a picture of the banyan tree up, if that was considered an invasive species.
Well, in India, it's considered a sacred tree. Many of their stories of the gods and goddesses in the Hindu tradition revolve around occurrences within the banyan tree. So I would say that they don't consider it invasive, but when taken out of its native environment, like there are fig trees in non-commercial fig trees, not like the commercial fig that we eat, but there are other fig trees that grow in Florida. And I suppose they can be a little bit invasive if they don't have the same pests and restrictions that they probably have in India. I don't think they have any trees in Florida that have quite grown to those levels that they have in India. Does that answer the question? Oh dear.
Yes.
Are you still with me?
Yes, it does.
It says yes, yes.
Okay. Like I said, I feel like I'm flying blind right now. This is slightly unnerving. Let's see. So we believe that, well, Burton Barnes and other people have studied Pando believe that the tree is at least 80,000 years old, if not older. Some people have suggested it could be up to 1 million years old, which is over 10 times, of course, the more conservative estimate of 80,000 years. And because of us humans, it's currently struggling to survive. The way that Barnes first discovered Pando was by looking at all the different trees within the colony. And simply by looking at clues like the common traits in the colony and the way the trees bud across the entire colony in a synchronized manner, and the fall foliage, the fall colors come in very, very closely timed. He first wrote that he believed it to be a single clonal colony. Later, this was validated by genetic testing. They've also done, it's a microcrystalline type of testing that also verifies that the trees are all genetically identical. And I really didn't quite understand how that proved that that it was the whole colony and not, an aspen here, a different, cousin aspen there. But the different testing has proven that Pando is indeed one clonal colony. And the aspen trees themselves, a single aspen will live to be about 130 to 150 years old. So at this point, the original tree that started Pando is long gone, been totally recycled to the elements, and gave birth to this huge forest. As I said, it's just a bit bigger than the Mall of America, about 107 acres. There's, of course, it's, kind of makes a random blob-like shape when you outline it, unlike the Mall of America, which is this cute little tidy square. Although I think I'd rather get lost in the Pando Forest than at the mall. Right now, I don't think either one's too open because of COVID, but when it's over, maybe. Let's see. Pando is Latin for I spread, and Pando was actually given that name about in the 80s by a researcher who came back to study Pando, but different one from Barnes, and he felt it was appropriate. He felt that, Pando would keep growing and eventually get bigger, but unfortunately it hasn't. And there we are. As young as it feels. I like to say we should respect our elders. In human history, the belief is that it wasn't until the Neolithic age, about 10,000, let me see if I'm counting my zeros correctly, about 10,000 BC. It was only 3,000 BC that we started actually writing things down. And the oldest cave painting that we've discovered so far is 35 plus thousand years old. Of course, by that time, the original tree of Pando had already died and decayed and was recycled into new baby quaking aspens. And it was already a well-established colony by that time. We've been the ones who have been guilty for directly harming Pando. Not deliberately, but you can see over the course of the years that the growth hasn't been as consistent. And we've done several things that have hurt Pando. Oops. Oh, sorry. Wolves and deer. The reason I put down wolves is because America went through a stage of wolf eradication. I've read some reports of environmentalists who have said that, this one person, his statement was, we believed we were making it easier for us to hunt deer, that eradicating the wolves, we'd have more deer to hunt. And that didn't turn out quite the way it was anticipated. Wolves do more than just kill deer, they alter the way the deer behave. And when deer are not afraid of wolves, they will be more bold in where they go to browse. They will totally change the way the environment recycles. When wolves are introduced back into an environment, as was discovered in Yellowstone, it increased the fear factor, well, for one, the fear factor, the aversion of the deer to the areas in which wolves were more likely to hunt them. So they stayed into, the deer began to stay in more thickets, open fields. The growth patterns of open fields changed. And actually, oddly enough, beavers were able to make more dams, and that changed the water flow. And by some estimates, simply by putting wolves back at Yellowstone has done more to regenerate the park and to keep it a viable environment than any other single action that has been attempted. One of the other things we've done is we've suppressed fires. I remember, only you can prevent forest fires, Smokey the Bear, and how if you see a fire, report it, and all these different things. But one of the ways that Pando regenerates is by sprouting first after a fire. And it's that young sprouts that help keep the root system young and vibrant and continually growing. They also let cattle graze, although anymore the cattle aren't grazing much more than 2 weeks or to a month a year. But still, cattle will eat small bushes and succulent shoots when they can. I've seen them nosh down those things too. And so it's not really helping the Pando regenerate when all the young little treelines are being eaten. And of course, the road must have caused some stress with cutting through the soil and placing down the pavement. By now, it's probably a stabilized situation. Although I do kind of wonder, how are the roots doing that are underneath the road, because Pando's continues on both sides. As I said, the trees that grow in Pando supply the root structure with its requirements. If you've ever grown asparagus, I've never been successful in growing asparagus myself, but if you've been successful growing asparagus, you know that eventually you have to let the asparagus grow to maturity so that it can feed the roots so you can have more asparagus the next year. If you harvest all the sprouts that come up, there won't be anything to feed the roots so that the roots will survive the winter. And it's just like that in Pando. And that's part of the problem. Few new tree suckers have been growing, and without them, eventually Pando will pass away. One of the things they've been doing is to fence it in, giving the little boys a chance. And by fencing it in, I'm not saying they're fencing in the deer, they're fencing in different areas of Pando to allow anything that grows there a chance to grow unmolested by deer and whatever. And my hope is that Pando can survive us. Pando's been there for at least 80,000 years. And it'd be nice if Pando could be 80,000 more.